Okay, I am live. I'm going to play some music in a second, but if you guys don't have sound, let me know, okay? Let me know if there's sound in the chat. Let me know if there's sound coming from a mic, because there was a mic issue last time.
I keep on working, got purpose and worth. Music's my cure and this world is my purse. Get rid of this curse with every verse. Of course I've been hurt, but some have been much worse. Leave me alone, get out of my head. Block out the opinions until I am dead. They all go to sleep, but you listen instead. Listen some more and you'll cease to regret. I keep on working, I got it on track. You gonna see my name up on the flag. I sail the ship and I'll never come back. I keep this bitch on the line to attack. Never look back, I make a record like Crash. Top of my bracket I smash, up like a pack. I'm about to stack it like cash. It's gonna happen so fast. It never changed myself, I've always stayed the same, no doubt. I've always played the game all out, and I am here to stay right now. So don't call it a comeback.
Yo.
I ain't running, here to stay steady, gun.
Okay, so interesting little side note. It appears that yesterday's stream from 121 onward, my stuff is muted, which is weird because I was talking to people in the chat and responding to people in the chat. So let me know right now if you guys have sound, because there should be sound. All right, I'm going to check my, let's check. See what's going on. Which is weird because I was talking to people. Yeah, so there's sound right now. I don't know what happened. I hope hope no one tried to copyright my voice. That would be funny. Anyway, let's get started. We're doing some Stick of Joseph stuff. I'm going to hit the... How long is this video? Let's go to the 1 minute mark. Hopefully there won't be any music playing. Let's go.
On. Jackson and I are going to be the capstone speakers. They saved the worst for last, and so that's going to be us Saturday at 7:30.
I don't know why the screen keeps changing.
It's at 6:30, not 7:30. Sorry.
Is when we're going to speak.
Just come anyway.
Just come anyway. Everyone. But Greg, let's just get right into it.
Just come anyway.
Just come anyway. Everyone's invited. So those details are below.
Yeah. Without further ado.
Hello. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Stick of Joseph YouTube channel. We're here at the Firm Foundation Conference. We've been here the last couple of days. It's been awesome. Met a lot of you, and it's been fun to interact with you. There's going to be another one in October, so we'll announce that, and we'd love to see you there. Today, we are with Greg Mattson, catching him right after he just gave an awesome speech. We only got him for like 10, 15 minutes. But, Greg, let's just get right into it. What was the main message of your last speech that you gave? I found it to be very provoking, thought-provoking.
Yeah, the primary message is that critical theory, just coming out of academia, is a new worldview that is reinterpreting our culture and changing the way we look at things. But more importantly, and more scary, is that it is reinterpreting the gospel and the sacred scriptures like the Book of Mormon.
And so where are you seeing this more prominently? Like what sort of things are being reinterpreted in Scripture?
So I'll give you an example. There's if I run... It's so interesting because the Book of Mormon, to me, really is a lesson on critical theory, right? It's about victim and oppressor. You have the victims who claim to be victims constantly in the Lamanites, Lamanites, starting with Laman and Lemuel. You have the oppressors who the Lamanites view the Nephites as these oppressors, and they're always trying to pull them down. Then you have the dissenters in between the two, the Nephite dissenters, and what they do is they're the same thing. They're looking at themselves as victims. They are antichrist always, and they always end up with the Lamanites. Now they could go off as a third party, they never do. Well, they all end up with the antichrist Lamanites.
One thing that's important to point out too with the dissenters is that a lot of times they look at themselves probably as oppressors first, and then they get on the side of the victims, and then they become a victim. So, for example, you have people who I can't remember who it is. It might be Corey Antimer, or I can't remember, but where he's talking about, oh, you bond these people down with your foolish ordinances and your this and that. But he has enough understanding of it all where he probably was on the Nephite side prior. He probably saw it as we are tying people down, we are oppressing them, and then he eventually joins their side, which I think is something that we see today, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what's pulling them away. That's what their movements are about.
Don't forget your Culligan water.
They all want tyranny over liberty, preferably a king. They are all anti-Christ. They all end up going with the Lamanites. And this is important to see because the Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ. So that's what the whole dynamic is about. We oftentimes look at the dissenters and the Lamanites as this kind of this enemy of maybe power hungry, right? It's just like they're bad people. Mm-hmm. That's not the case. They are religious. They are, but they don't believe in Christ. And this dynamic with the dissenters, you find you've got the Amlicites, you've got the Amalekites, you've got the Amalekiahites, you've got the kingmen who don't quite make it because their heads are cut off by Captain Moroni. But then you have the King Noah and the priests who end up with the Lamanites. All of them wants to kill the prophets. King Noah has Abinadi killed, not because he's preaching just repentance, but specifically, you're told in Mosiah 7, he is killed because he preached about Christ coming down to earth and taking on the sins of the world. That's why they kill him. And this begins at the beginning of the Book of Mormon with 1 Nephi 1. Lehi is killed, or is going to be killed, not because he's telling them they're bad boys and girls in Jerusalem. He's going to be killed because he's prophesying about Jesus Christ. That's the issue, and that is the dividing line always throughout the entire Book of Mormon.
And so what are some of the arguments coming from academia today that is reframing how we've always understood the scriptures to kind of water it down and to change it?
Yeah, so again, it's so interesting because the Book of Mormon is somewhat about critical theory. It's teaching us the lessons of why it is so bad and how it destroys civilization.
I don't agree with that. I don't know. I don't think critical theory destroys civilization, so that's a lesson of the Book of Mormon. That's another reason why I'm going to end up disagreeing with it.
And yet, a portion of academia that studies the Book of Mormon and church history, they're doing the exact same thing that we see the dissenters, the Gadiant robbers.
Dan, they're talking to you, Dan.
And others that are doing, where they're applying critical theory as a worldview, then to the Book of Mormon. So, Nephi is a really bad person. This has been stated specifically. Nephi is a bad person. He's not a good person because he cuts off the head of Laban, right? He's the oppressor. Yeah. Laban is the victim. The Gadiant robbers, professor at ASU says this. He says, the Gadiant robbers have a reason for what they're doing. They are dispossessed, he says. In other words,
therefore justified.
Yeah, they're colonized, right? This is about post-colonialism, and that's just a critical theory. And they're colonized, and therefore they're the victims, and they have the right to do what they're doing. This is what happens when you use critical theory on a piece of literature. It just turns everything on its head.
Yeah, blood oaths and all of that are okay as long as you're doing it.
Again, I don't agree with that. I think this is a travesty of it's an apologetical travesty. This is not good. This is telling people to be ignorant and stupid. That's wrong.
As long as you're colonized.
And I'm not saying the Book of Mormon says that. I'm saying this guy's saying that as his interpretation of the Book of Mormon.
Always justify the means, yes.
That's the scary thing. Now, what is the solution that we get in the Book of Mormon to critical theory, and what is the solution, and how do we apply it today to those who are trying to change the language? Because there was something that's pointed out to me, I don't know how long ago it was, but that you don't have to change the laws in order to, oppress people. You just have to change the language so that you can reinterpret the laws, right? And I feel like that's kind of how, so, the same people that are, saying the Gadianton robbers are just dispossessed, they would say, oh no, we need to follow God's commandments, but they're going to change our language so that God's commandments mean something different.
Yeah, so that same professor uses the term, talks about the word iniquity in the Book of Mormon. And, this is a very postmodern thing, but he takes the word iniquity and he says, whenever you read the word iniquity in the Book of Mormon, instead of thinking about iniquity, I want you to think about the word inequity. And so this capsulizes perfectly what critical theory is and postmodernism, right? He says, first of all, he's changing the language, as you said, but he is saying a term which is iniquity, which we want to be aware of and we want to be concerned about, and we want to push off from ourselves. And when we are iniquitous, we need to repent and use the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ, right? That's what it's for. He instead wants to say, no, think of inequity. So it's never about yourself.
So other people have to change.
So the problem is always out there. It's never in myself. And the doctrine of Christ is simply saying, be like Christ. What are you going to do to bring upon you the
doctrine of Christ,
character of God? That is primary in everything. It's, Jesus is not out fighting the Romans. Barabbas was, and that's who the elite Jews said we want to save, right? But Jesus was saying, no, I'm not throwing off the shackles of the oppressors. That's not my movement. I'm throwing off the shackles of sin. And there's a very distinct difference. And I think the thing that we need to really focus on and teach those around us is those contrasts between what does critical theory teach and what does the doctrine of Christ teach, because ultimately they are antithetical to each other.
And that's why critical theory is anti-Christ.
Absolutely.
And so last thing.
I don't think I agree with that at all. Does anybody know if the Pocket Zohar comes in English? I want to get the Pocket Zohar. I've had it on my wish list for a long time, and I want to get it.
And then we'll let you go because I know you have more important stuff to do. What would you say to the moms, the dads, the grandmas, grandpas, the young men and women listening? What can they do every single day to fight against this critical theory and this changing of the scriptures?
You've got to learn what it is. You've got to be aware that it's happening.
Yeah, but you yourself are changing the scriptures. And then Christianity, let's go layer by layer. Each addition to the Bible from the original 5 reinterpret the previous stuff. Okay, so already that's an issue. But not just internal interpretation. This is external, because this is a slightly different cultural group, a slightly different social group. Okay, and then you go from that to then the intertestimonials kind of reinterpreting mildly, and then you have the New Testament reinterpreting the Old Testament. And in a way, you have the Gospels reinterpreting what Paul says. And you have Paul reinterpreting whatever the oral Gospel was before it was written down. And then you have each letter reinterpreting the previous information until you get to Revelation. So you have reinterpretation of reinterpretation. All of that is canonized, sanctified, dogmatized, great. Dogmatic, and there's another one, doctrinized, and then you're going to get to different denominations reinterpreting, and then you're going to get a step further, and you have whatever the religion, the Christian religion that informed Joseph Smith, you have that being reinterpreted in the Book of Mormon, and then you have each subsequent, since you have living apostles, you have each subsequent, and I guess prophets, you have each subsequent apostle or leader reinterpreting the Book of Mormon to where it can just become gibberish. I mean, this is not a good critique of the Bible or of the Book of Mormon. It just kind of makes it all mean nothing, or it can mean anything, which means it means nothing as well.
And I would say read the Book of Mormon, but read the Book of Mormon in the light of critical theory. Understand that the victim/oppressor dynamic is the perfect tool to disintegrate a family, a church, a nation, the world. It's the exact same thing that happened in the war in heaven. It's the exact same thing that happened with the story of Cain and Abel, the first real story we have after Adam and Eve. This is all about victim and oppressor and bringing down those that are trying to follow eternal law. So if you can spell that out to someone and show them the doctrine of Christ and what is not in line with the doctrine of Christ, then you can show the disparity, you can show the differences and the contrast. But if you're unaware of it, which most people are, then it's very difficult to do. It's very difficult. You hear your child have a new language and saying new things, and they're coming home from college and they're saying words that you don't even hear, you've never heard before, and they have a little bit of a different attitude maybe, and this obviously isn't everyone, but they're learning critical theory. They're being taught a new word.
Teenage angst and college angst existed long before critical theory was as prominent as it is today. Sorry, this is bullshit. This is apologetical bullshit and telling you not to question whatever it is that they're talking about. This is not good. All right, let's move on to the next.
Should good car insurance cost you a month? $80? $120? Nope. Try $38 a month.
So there's a comparison shopping site that finds you lower car insurance rates based on your info. You just put in some information that the site needs to find you lower rates, stuff like, where you live and your driving history, then boom, you get recommendations directly from the site and can receive your quote.
Was I enjoying the
We
commercial?
have already pledged that we will keep the commandments. Have you heard someone say,
do whatever I want? And it's just like, not really. Yes, this is a free country, but there are rules and bounds by which we have to abide by in order to be quote unquote free. And so we're going to get into that. So let's just get into this video. This video that we're going to watch today is Elder Bednar in Argentina, and he is talking to the saints about agency. So let's get into it.
the principle of moral agency is the least understood of all gospel principles. It is taught incorrectly often, and it leads people to behave in ways.
I'm guessing this is a Mormon idea because I've never heard free agency talked about in this manner.
That are not appropriate. As I listen to members of the church all over the world, this is how they define agency. It's the ability to choose, and I can do what I want. That's false. Why do we have agency? Go find in the Pearl of Great Price, in the book of Moses, God's explanation for why we have agency. It is to choose Him, not to choose what we want, but to choose God and to love and serve each other.
All right, so let's look into the Pearl of Great Price and see if we can go find those verses that he was talking about. So I did a little bit of a scripture chase, brought to you by Scripture Notes. We are not sponsored by them, but I love Scripture Notes, and they have a really cool. They have the best search bar ever. And so we did a search for agency, for choosing, for all those sort of things, and we found some awesome verses in there. Now, the first one that we'll read is Abraham 3:24-25. So a little bit of back context on this one. This is talking about the pre-existent realm. Pre-mortal. That's another thing that we say wrong is pre-existent. Because there is no beginning to our existence. That's like one of the fundamental claims of the restoration. So
I disagree with that. We definitely have a beginning and we definitely have an end.
Pre-mortal realm, it's talking about what's going on there, and it says this: and there was one who stood among them that was like unto God, and he said unto those that were with him, We will go down, for there is space there, and we will take of these materials, and we will make an earth whereon these may dwell. These meaning the other spirits. And 25, and we will prove them herewith to see if they will do all things whatsoever the Lord their God shall command them. Okay, so right there, that's a very clear statement. Like, hey, we're creating this place to test them to see if they will choose God. So like our agency, our ability to choose is there to see if we will choose God. And then here in Moses 7:32, it says, The Lord said unto Enoch,
Hey, BS, can you hear me? My mic cut out at the end of last night's stream, even though I was talking to you and a few other people. There was no sound actually coming through. So even though you could hear me on the recording, there isn't anything. So just let me know if there's sound.
Behold these thy brethren, they are the workmanship of mine own hands, and I gave unto them their knowledge in the day I created them, and in the Garden of Eden gave I unto man his agency. So we're learning here, I like this verse right here because it talks about how he gave them their knowledge and their agency, and I think those things come hand in hand, where if there isn't knowledge, and
So is this like the free will versus predestination debate in Christianity or Catholicism in Christianity? Or is this more like the determinism versus libertarian free will debate in, is it physics? I forgot the topic. Is it neuroscience, physics? I don't know. Is it that debate or is it more the Christian theological debate? Where are the Mormons standing on this free agency thing? Or is it more like grace? Are they talking about grace or just using different languages, different words?
The tree of knowledge of good and evil, that's what gives man agency. If there isn't opposition, then we have no ability to choose because there is no choice, right? And so as we're seeing right here that agency, free will, they have to do with knowledge, and there is a responsibility that goes with them, right? Let's get back to Elder Bednar.
Now, buckle up. Are you buckled up?
I'm buckled up.
Okay, here we go. When you and I enter the baptismal covenants, there are three conditions of the covenant. A willingness to take upon ourselves the name of Christ, a commitment to always remember him, and a commitment to keep the commandments. We learn about those elements of the covenant, and we exercise our agency to accept those conditions of the covenant. When we enter into that covenant and begin to have the name of Christ come upon us, our agency is enlarged. It's no longer individual agency. It is enlarged to become representative agency, and representing Christ and his name at all times, in all places, and in all things becomes more important than what we want.
Okay, that's powerful right there. So let's kind of break that down. So at first he talks about how we learn the stipulations of the covenant when we get baptized, right? And that's based on our knowledge. We use our agency at that point, our individual agency, to decide to become an agent of Christ. Now, the way I look at this, and Elder Kieran actually came to my mission years ago, and he gave a little training on this, on what agency is. And the way he described it, I feel like is very important. He talked about how, what are agents that we know in like movies and stuff? You got like secret agents, you got FBI agents, things like that. And he talks about, well, when you're an...
B.S. Lewis says, I visited a temple and some Mormon friends said Adam and Eve were supposed to eat the tree. Yeah, there's some Gnostic influence in Mormonism as far as I can tell, but I'm not really sure if it's Gnostic influences like direct, or if it's more like a remnant of Gnosticism or speculation, open speculation that ends up mirroring what Gnostic thought comes to.
FBI agent, that means you are now a representative of the federal government, right? You are now a representative of the law of the United States of America. But that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. It means that you now have an expanded agency, so you can do more things than the average citizen can do. But there are rules and bounds in which you have to act in order to continue with that power and authority. But the second FBI agent goes outside of those bounds and breaks the rules which he has agreed to follow, then his agency is taken away. He loses his badge and, could even go to prison. And so that is what agency is. So you start off with this individual agency that is limited by your knowledge. But once you come to a knowledge of Christ, who he is, and you make covenants to follow him, to take on his name, then your agency does expand. You have more ability to work within, but there are also rules by which you agree to abide by. And if you don't abide by those, then your agency is actually taken away. And so I think that's where he's getting at. But he continues, and so let's keep watching.
We have already pledged that we will keep the commandments. Have you heard someone say, a member of the church who has entered into the baptismal covenant, I have my agency. I can do what I want.
I probably said that a couple of times to my parents growing up or to friends or something like that. But as we have already learned, that is stupid.
You ever heard that? Yeah, you know what the answer is? No, you can't. You don't understand agency. You don't have agency to do whatever you want. The hymn is called Choose the Right, not choose what you want. So from tonight on, don't ever use a misunderstood concept of agency to justify sin. You can't just choose what you want. And when you
Is he fast forwarding, or is there like a little weird noise coming through?
begin to understand that principio, then you're on the road to becoming
Bilingual.
spiritually self-reliant, dependent upon God, and devoted to representing him all the time, everywhere.
I love that. And it really simplifies things because there are so many voices and things competing for our attention in the world. And if we hadn't made a covenant with Christ that we would pay our attention to him, because that's essentially what we're doing now that I'm thinking about, like when you get baptized, to remember him, to always remember him. That's what we covenant to do. And that is us saying, I'm going to pay attention to you. There are all these things in the world competing for my attention, but I am deciding to put paying attention to you at the top of that priority list. And what that does is it does really simplify things for us when it comes to how we're going to use our agency going forward.
Simplifying seems like a controlling pejorative in this
No longer does it need to be a question
context.
because we already have made that commitment. Now, it's not that simple, and everything is definitely nuanced because we aren't perfect beings, and when we make a commitment, it's not like we're always able to just stick with it all the way through, but that is essentially where we want to be. One way I'm thinking about it now that I can conceptualize it is like when I was a kid, like when my son's going through this right now. This is actually a good example. He's potty training, and he was doing so good for a while. He was like 3 weeks, just like no accidents, nothing. But like the last 3 days, he's just been peeing his pants. And it's just crazy to think. I don't know why he's going back. And this seems to be normal. That's what people are telling me. This happens sometimes, a regression. I don't understand it. And that is so far removed from the choices that I make now. It is not even a choice for me to pee my pants anymore. Like that's not even in my wheelhouse. Where for him, he's still at that level of agency, this smaller level where he's making decisions.
I think this is Trent Horn's argument about progressive revelation, just said even stupidly. Like, this is not a good explanation.
For things that we don't even think about. But eventually he's going to get that figured out, and that's no longer going to be a choice that he even has to spend brain power on to make anymore. He's not going to, because he's just going to realize, oh, peeing my pants is bad. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so that is essentially what we're trying to do with our agency. We're trying to expand our agency and our ability to choose by letting go of baser choices that are less important. We're trying to do is ascend.
I'm trying to be respectful, BS, but I literally had to stop myself from saying the same thing, that he can't choose to pee his pants. I mean, yes, you can. You can literally choose to do that. It's a weird choice, but you could do it.
Higher and higher agency, letting go of lesser things that we used to make choices about, because we no longer need to make choices about that. And so us as Christians, and as we make covenants of baptism, we are essentially filtering, hey, these sort of choices, that are below this level, I no longer have to spend brain power on that. I'm making this choice. I'm going to now operate in this higher realm of choices, right? Then you go into the temple and you even expand that agency more, and you open up and you leave behind.
That is not one of my kinks, BS. That actually kind of grosses me out. This is not the right place for this conversation, but just in general, body hair grosses me out, incredibly so. Pee and excrement grosses me out, and body size of a flabby, flabby size is something that I'm not. It bothers me. So there's like 4 different things that are just not a kink of mine. There's like maybe 2 more in there that I just can't get into, and yeah. So there's no chance, buddy. Yeah. So no. This is just a weird conversation for me.
Other choices.
What this guy's saying, not the religious stuff. Actually, I want to have a conversation about taboo and kink again with over one of Eva Lupine's videos when it comes to the fetishization of nuns. I meant to do that last week, so hopefully I'll remember to do it on Monday, because I think that'll be an interesting conversation. I know that those videos don't get great views on the live view, but they get pretty good views on the rewatch and on the VOD. Oh, if anyone knows, legitimate question. I should have opened the show with this. I'll have to open it. Tomorrow's video, I'll have to open it. So I'm eligible for monetization, but I got a problem, which is Google Pay doesn't work in the US anymore. And the link that I was sent to sign up to uses Google Pay. So I don't know how to get AdSense in Google Wallet or AdSense through another way. So my videos are now getting commercials. I'm not getting a ton of views, but even $100 a week, even $100 a month will help. So if you all know how to fix that, I'd greatly appreciate some advice, or what to do to address it, or if Google's going to have a solution, or you have to go through AdSense and you have to go to work AdSense to work on YouTube. If you have to go through Google Pay. How do you get to Google Wallet if I don't have a link to Google Wallet? What do I do to get all of that to work? Let me know.
I think what Elder Bednar is saying here is amazing, and
if you know,
I love having prophets that I can look to and learn from, because this is really wise stuff. Let's let him finish up speaking here.
Now, I want to say this in terms that I hope won't be scary, but they're true. If, after having entered into the covenant, we don't abide by the conditions of the covenant, it's breaking a covenant. It is not the exercise of agency anymore. Because what happened to our individual agency? It was enlarged. Now it's more important to represent Him. Is this making sense? But I want you to understand this is serious. Agency is the center point of our mortal experience. With that agency, we are agents to act. We are not objects to be acted upon.
Boom, mic drop right there. Let's go to that.
I don't agree with that interpretation. Let's hear that again. I don't agree with that interpretation at all.
It is not the exercise of agency anymore. Because what happened to our individual agency? It was enlarged. Now it's more important to represent Him. Is this making sense? But I want you to understand this is serious. Agency is the center point of our mortal experience. With that agency, we are agents to act. We are not objects to be acted upon.
Boom, mic drop right there.
No. That's incorrect from the Christian point of view. Yes, we have free will, and we believe it's limited free will or some other equation for free will. But we are slaves of God. We are the property of God. We either choose to serve Him, and then we have to do His will, or we choose to disobey Him, and we can do our own will. The two don't mix. So no, this is an incorrect interpretation from a biblical Christian understanding.
Let's go to that verse that he just referenced there at the end. He's referencing 2 Nephi chapter 2, And this is verse 14. This is Lehi talking to his sons. He says, "And now, my sons, I speak unto you these things for your profit and learning. For there is a God, and he hath created all things, both in the heavens and the earth, and all things that in them are, both things to act and things to be acted upon." And then later on, he says that we are free to choose whether or not to be acted upon or to act. And when you break it down, the covenants or the commandments specifically, when we use our agency to do what God asks, then we become more free. We are more free to act. And it's opposite of what the world tells us. It's opposite of what the adversary tells us. He says, oh, all of these rules, they're meant to bind you down. So we found it right here in Alma 30. You learn about Korihor, and he goes off on this rant that is very much like the rant that the world would go off of. And he says this. He says in verse 23, "Because I do not teach the foolish traditions of your fathers, and because I do not teach this people to bind themselves down under foolish ordinances and performances." Now, those ordinances are there to make covenants, right? So we're talking about covenants, commandments. This is all in the realm of agency, which are laid down by ancient priests to usurp power and authority over them, to keep them in ignorance, that they may not lift up their heads.
It'll be interesting what happens, how my opinion will be once I actually get to this in the Bible, in the Book of Mormon.
But be brought down according to thy words. Ye say that this is a free people. Behold, I say they are in bondage. Ye say that those ancient prophecies are true. Behold, I say that ye do not know that they are true. So you have this person who's like a representation of the world, where he's like, keeping the commandments, making covenants, those keep you in bondage. The only way to be free is to get rid of all these foolish traditions. But that is just not true. When you keep the commandments of God, and I've recognized this from personal experience, when we keep the commandments of God, when we use our agency the way God has told us to, what happens is we become more free. But when we don't, we become in bondage. And what are we in bondage to? To the negative consequences of our bad actions, right? And this is what the world won't tell you about. They'll say you're free to do whatever you want, but they never talk about the consequences of those actions, because there is a consequence attached to every action. And that is actually said in 2nd Nephi as well. In verse 27, he talks about how men are free according to the flesh, to choose liberty and eternal life through the great mediator, or to choose captivity and death through the captivity and power of the devil. This is showing that there is a relation between our choices and our final state, or our consequences, right? So we make certain choices, we can choose liberty and eternal life, or we make certain choices and we choose captivity and death. So there's this guy that I really love. As you guys know, I'm in the military, and there is someone who was actually influential in me joining the military. His name's Jocko Willink, and he has this catchphrase, and it's discipline equals freedom. And that is this is what we're talking about right here, is when you subject yourself to certain rules, you actually become more free. When you throw off certain rules that are rooted in truth, especially eternal truth, then you become more in bondage. And it's this paradox, this counterintuitive thing, where this is a perfect example. If I spend my life eating well and exercising well, that requires discipline. Now, that's going to make me have to do certain things in the moment, but overall, later on, I am going to be more free because I have a healthier body. I'm going to have more longevity in my life. When I'm in my 60s, I'll be moving around, running around. But if I decide to not be disciplined and do whatever I want, eat whatever I want, then later on, I'm going to have to pay the consequences, and I'm going to be in bondage. I'm not going to be able to do, I may not be able to do everything that I want to do because my body will be unhealthy. I won't be strong enough to do the things that I enjoy doing. And so that is what we're saying here, is that when we use our agency well, the agency that we get from God when we take on his name, become those FBI agents for Jesus, then we become more free. But if we step outside of those lines, we will be in bondage. And this is what the adversary has been trying to do from the beginning. And this will be our last verse that we that we go to. This is in Moses chapter 4, verse 3. And it says, "Wherefore, because that Satan rebelled against me and sought to destroy the agency of man, which I, the Lord, had given him, and also that I should give unto him mine own power, by the power of mine only begotten, I caused that he should be cast down." So he's talking about how Satan, from the beginning, has been trying to destroy the agency of man.
Now,
So
I'm curious if, because Dan has kind of a problem with the Christian understanding of Satan, how he feels about the Mormon understanding of Satan.
agency, this power we get from God, from Jesus Christ, Satan's trying to get us to forfeit it by stepping outside of it. And another way that he destroys agency, that he tries to destroy agency, is he tricks you into thinking there are no consequences. That's what happens in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, it's not that the lie is that Satan said that thou shalt not surely die. That he said the consequence that God said would exist, that's not actually what's going to happen. And this lie that we tell ourselves that for some reason we're going to be able to go against the nature of reality. I'm going to be able to sin. I'm going to be able to do this sin, but it's not going to turn out bad. I'm going to be able to evade the consequences. This is the mortal lie of human beings that come from the adversary himself. With all of this said and done, Elder Bednar is an apostle. He is a representative of Jesus Christ. We are representatives of Jesus Christ. When we get baptized, when we go to the temple, we take on his name. So let's act within our agency. Remember that we've already dispensed with the lower choices. Those no longer need to be choices anymore. We don't need to be peeing our underwear anymore because we know that that's not the best way to go. What we can do now is we can focus on the higher choices, the good, better, best choices, and stop worrying about the right and wrong choices. So, until next time, use your agency well and stay curious.
I didn't like that. I did not like that. Where are we? What's going on? Yeah, it's this one, right? So forward one. Okay.
Another episode of Zelph on the Shelf. I am one of your hosts, Samantha Shelley.
And I'm Tana Gilliland. Do you know what's funny about that? Is I was thinking we should do full names today. And then you did. We did.
However, we pulled a quick one on you. We switched names. That's an example of a lie.
Really strong.
Something we will be discussing at length today. So today we'll be discussing the concept of lying for the Lord, a rich tradition in the history of the LDS Church.
Yeah, it really feels like lying for the Lord is how it's been able to survive this long.
Yeah.
Like they've relied on it.
Oh, absolutely.
It hasn't just been it's been like quite a standard practice that if it hadn't have been there, who's to say what the church would even be in 2023?
Amen. In fact, playing loosey-goosey with the truth actually predates Mormonism. Of course, before Joseph Smith ever pulled a religion from his hat, he used to tell gullible farmers he could lead them to ancient burial sites protected by guardian spirits.
He looks real different a couple of years down the line, doesn't he?
With whom he would perform ritualistic negotiations, i.e. magic, to secure their treasure, presumably while others were doing the digging.
In his defense, I used to tell kids on the playground that my mum was taking us to a theme park that weekend so they would play with me.
I just said I had a brother in college who would beat up the bullies. I should have said that my dad was God and would burn them alive at the last day.
You can't beat that. And there's always some reason why the spirits couldn't show up that day or couldn't help.
Yeah, the enchantments were always too strong. The people didn't have enough faith. Suffice it to say, no treasure was ever found, and this led to a series of courtroom appearances where Joseph Smith's reputation as a treasure-digging fraud was forever sealed. It was this bad reputation was the reason that Isaac Hale, Joseph's father-in-law, disapproved of his marriage to his daughter Emma.
So basically, Emma's dad just knew that he was always doing his little schemes.
Yep. Didn't
want his daughter being a part of that, no stability.
Now, of course, one of Joseph Smith's biggest deceptions was the production of the Book of Mormon, which came from that very seerstone he used to trick the farmers. But we've gone into that plenty in other videos, and we don't have to debunk that now. Suffice it to say, it's riddled with errors, contradictions, and evidences of being a contemporary work produced from the mind of Joseph Smith, and given his access to the traditional beliefs surrounding the origins of the Native Americans. in his day and time. I'd say that Joseph's biggest stumbling block in terms.
Okay, kind of anybody remember the cartoon, the anime Van Dread? I don't know why I really like that one, and I just saw an offer for it.
Of honesty came through polygamy. As most people who are interested in the subject of Mormonism are aware, Joseph's first polygamous wife, second wife, was Fanny Alger, who Emma witnessed. Ugh. Do you know the story of Fanny Alger?
Well, what I imagine is true is that she found them having sex in the barn. They say it was a transaction in the barn, right?
Emma said that she witnessed a transaction in the barn between Joseph and their 16-year-old live-in servant, Fanny Alger.
And if it had all been actually above board, well, first of all, he would have got the sealing power before it happened. That's a big one. But then also, he's supposed to get Emma's permission, right? Before every marriage.
Yeah. In Doctrine and Covenants 132, the revelation that officially canonizes the principle of polygamy, Joseph Smith gives the explicit command that all wives are, first of all, supposed to be virgins, and second of all, that Emma is supposed to give her consent for each of them, otherwise it's adultery.
That doesn't have to be an ick. I mean, purity and virginity is not a bad thing.
And we know from all the available historical evidence that Joseph Smith did not follow that his own commandments in that regard. He took many wives without Emma's knowledge, and many of them were not virgins, of course. Several of them were underage girls, but others were already married.
It's like, why even give that revelation if you already know you've been breaking both those rules a lot?
Yeah.
It's like the same energy of I'm the least racist person in the world. It's just like that same thing of like, you always think that people will be smarter about their lying.
Yeah. The Fanny Alger instance is probably the most damning right off the bat. Just shows what a clusterfuck this whole thing is, because you have the LDS Church, who on their website define adultery as any unlawful sexual association of men and women. I guess there's a loophole for non-binary people. But it's clear, totally evident, that Joseph Smith was engaged in an unlawful relationship with Fanny Alger. On the first account, it was against anti-bigamy laws of the time. It was illegal to have multiple wives in Ohio during Joseph Smith's time. So one, he's breaking a law. Not a law that I think is just, but the law nonetheless, and a point that the church continually argues is that it has to be lawfully ordained by, the government has to approve of relationships in order for them to be valid and sexual. So he broke the law. Not only that, he broke the spiritual law. We know from church history that, I guess I should say, Mormons believe that in order for a marriage to be fully binding and sanctified by God, it has to be done through the sealing power. Now, Joseph Smith didn't receive the sealing power until 1837, about 3 years after his relationship with Fanny. Which goes to show, again, that this was totally an illicit affair. And we're not even talking about the possible ethical dilemmas of age and power differentials.
Also, when your own, what was Oliver Cowdery, like a counselor, first counselor or something? When your own first counselor is calling it out as gross, I mean, you have a problem.
Yeah, so that's actually becomes...
Think precision machining is just for guys? Think again.
Down the road with, you have the Kirtland Safety Society, which is a bank that Joseph Smith set up, saying that he saw it in vision and he promised the members that if they would invest, it would provide for the temporal safety of the saints. But due to situations outside of his control, economic downturns and outside opposition, the bank failed, contradicting the revelations that he gave, and a lot of people lost all their money. And so naturally, a lot of people began to doubt the prophetic gift of Joseph Smith, including Oliver Cowdery. And that's when the Fanny Alger story started to circulate among the general membership. And Oliver Cowdery called the Fanny Alger affair a dirty, nasty, filthy scrape.
Potentially a classic male move, though, to not really care about it and speak up about it until you've lost money. Until something's affected. It's like, that underage girl will let it slide until my money's gone.
Yeah. And, I imagine that there's, at one point, their coworkers working on their little book together. Yeah. Things start spiraling out of control. He takes more and more excesses and becomes less and less concerned with other people's opinions. Perhaps Oliver starts giving power to different people. And so Oliver Cowdery starts propagating the story of the Fanny Alger incident, which is corroborated by multiple contemporary sources. This isn't something he just pulled out of a hat like the Book of Mormon. Because he refused to back down on the accusation of adultery, Oliver Cowdery was excommunicated from the church, becoming the first person to be excommunicated for telling the truth. The first of a long list of people, especially in regard to polygamy, which, as I said, becomes the stumbling block of the church and the precedent for lying for the Lord for the next several centuries. Joseph Smith taking wives. Meanwhile, the church publication, the Millennial Star, says the Latter-day Saints, from the rise of the church in 1830 till the year 1843, had no authority to marry any more than one wife each. To have done otherwise would have been a great transgression. Another church-owned paper, the Times and Seasons, wrote, the law of the land and the rules of the church do not allow one man to have more than one wife alive at once. So, on the one hand, we have Joseph Smith taking multiple wives, disregarding the laws of the land and his own spiritual admonitions, excommunicating those who tell the truth about it, and then publishing a narrative that completely contradicts his private actions.
I definitely think, because from Brigham onward, the church was very sort of open about its polygamy, except for that time when they said they were stopping it, but they didn't actually stop it. But you know what I mean? It became such a accepted part of Mormonism. I think it's easy to forget how much when Joseph was alive, it was in secret. It's the reason he died. It's the reason he got put in prison. Do you know what I mean? It's
right.
He burns down a printing press for exposing him. Everything came to a head because of his lies about polygamy. It wasn't this Joseph giving sermons about how hard it was. It was literally just him being I'm not doing that. The whole time. There was never a time where he was this commandment's being, that was just Brigham onward, right?
Yeah. And
so the average church member was just not aware that this was happening.
Right.
It was just Joseph Smith having sex with a bunch of people, basically.
And it is weird because there are a ton of people who know about it and who are affected by it.
Right.
And it becomes this public secret and if people, find out about it, and he also initiates several people into the practice, telling them that if they get caught, he'll punish them, excommunicate them, and then invite them back into the fold on promise that they keep hush-hush about it.
Very Keith Raniere.
Totally. It's so funny watching the NXIVM, the cult NXIVM's leader, Keith Raniere. You see him doing the exact same stuff that Joseph Smith did. It's they followed the same cult leader playbook. It's really incredible. Of course, Joseph had a history, as we said, of proposing to married men's wives, contrary to his own revelation. In fact, on multiple occasions, he sent men on missions and then married their wives. Modern apologists refute that, saying, that's a lie, that only happened twice.
You need to do a skit of Joseph searching on Pornhub and it's man proposing to another man's wife.
This particular predilection got him in the biggest trouble of his life in 1844 when he proposed to the wife of his counselor, William Law. Of course, she refused him, and he then said that she actually proposed to him, and he turned her down.
She was ugly and a bitch anyway, so I didn't even care.
Totally. Of course, as to be expected, William Law didn't appreciate this act of Joseph's, proposing to his wife, lying about it, and he brought it up with Joseph. Joseph retaliated by firing him from his position as counselor, and then later holding a kangaroo court that went against church protocols and ultimately excommunicated William Law from the church. Again, for just taking issue with the fact that Joseph did something and then lied about it. So then, as the history shows, William Law went on to, with several other people who had been thrown under the bus by Joseph Smith, published the Nauvoo Expositor, a paper which chronicled Joseph's extramarital affairs and several of his political dealings, some stuff that the government wouldn't be too happy about. And
these con men never just have their finger in one or two pies. It's always just
The future of your business is here. Journey to the East in Final Fantasy.
Oh. Come on. There we go.
To Dave and Bethany's reaction to the Paul and Morgan 20. I'm just kidding. Hey guys, today we're going to be reacting to our reaction to Dave and Bethany's reaction. Hey guys, today we're going to be reacting.
What just happened? There we go.
By Joseph Smith, published the Nauvoo Expositor, a paper which chronicled Joseph's extramarital affairs and several of his political dealings, some stuff that the government wouldn't be too happy about. And
these con men never just have their finger in one or two pies. It's always just weirdly extensive, the level of corruption, and where you're why don't you just keep it simple? Just do the have the wives, do that.
No.
Get some money, but no, they always got to be reaching further and further out and making everything more and more unstable.
And again, I don't think that the anti-bigamy laws of the time were necessarily just. I'm a polyamorous person. I believe that people should be able to have relationships with whoever they want. But again, the fact that the church is constantly iterating,
a little hypocritical there, don't you think?
The need to abide by the laws of the land.
Yeah.
They set themselves up to be hypocrites, which is so weird.
And it's just a common LDS response, I feel, to conversations about Joseph's polygamy, to say it wasn't illegal back then. And it's it was.
It totally was.
But they obviously they're focusing on the age thing. It's it wasn't illegal. It's so is it a problem if it's illegal in a different way? Or
yeah. Yeah, they're age of consent laws didn't even exist, and it's well, the neural development of children was the same 200 years ago as it is now.
A tiny change.
Why would that make a difference? Mm-hmm. And then when it actually is shown that he was breaking the law, you're just turn a blind eye.
That's actually
some people say he had to be quiet about it because otherwise they'd be persecuted. And The funny
They
thing
could be
is,
loud about their well, actually, yeah, they had to be racist too because then they were
otherwise they'd be persecuted.
and they were still persecuted, but the persecution just would have been worse.
Right. And what's
some
funny
reason.
is that there were other communities contemporary to the church that were practicing polygamy, like Oneida. And I'm not saying that they practiced it well or ethically. I'm just saying that they did openly and didn't receive persecution. The persecution, the likes of like William Law and others, were because Joseph Smith was practicing polygamy in secret and predatorily, and then lying about it publicly and punishing those who spoke out about it. That was the beef, and that's why there was such a strong retaliation.
What I find interesting is there had to have been people who were
You know, I'm finding the stuff from Zelph on a shelf much more educational and interesting than the stuff on, let's say, Stick of Joseph when it comes to Mormonism. But I'm not sure if their bias makes them less, if their bias against it makes them just as unreliable as those who have a bias for it. Because they're not neutral at all.
alive under Joseph Smith, who heard Joseph Smith saying, I have only one wife, who were then alive under Brigham, and heard Brigham say that Joseph was practicing polygamy, actually.
But at that point, you're just, down the memory hole.
Yeah, when the apocalypse doesn't happen, it strengthens your faith. We know that from cult psychology.
Absolutely. And it is funny, shortly after William Law's accusations became public, Joseph Smith confidently declared, "What a thing it is for a man to be accused of committing adultery and having 7 wives, when I can only find one. I am the same man, and as innocent as I was 14 years ago, and I can prove them all perjurers." At that time, he had over 30 wives, something that the LDS Church now accepts.
And that's a church-approved quote.
Totally, yeah, this
So,
is from the history of the church.
There's so much within like church-approved literature that is like blatantly proves.
Something's got a hold on me, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I must be loved. Oh, I said, oh, hey, hey, yeah. Oh, it must be love. It must be love.
Oh, I'm probably going to get a copyright.
What Joseph was like.
And what's really funny is that the history of the church, this will come back later, but has been scrubbed multiple times under the direction of church leadership in the historical department to remove all unsightly evidences, things that don't go with the modern narrative or the modern morality. For instance, they scrubbed the records of any reference to Joseph Smith drinking alcohol, something he did throughout his life, including on the day he died in Carthage jail. And they also...
Just so pathetic that they would scrub that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the least of your concerns. But it's like, even that is so threatening.
So yeah, Joseph gets caught lying. He burns down the printing press that's telling the truth about his extramarital affairs. And the government obviously takes issue with a public leader, because he's not only the president of the church, he's also the mayor of Nauvoo, showing how little he cares for the separation of church and state.
Declaring himself the king
Yep.
of the world. Just a little bit.
Just little things here and there. Yeah, the government didn't like him burning down a printing press for having opinions he didn't like or for revealing history that he didn't want revealed. He gets sent to Carthage, where he's ultimately killed.
No, he was killed and persecuted because his testimony of Jesus Christ was too powerful and bold and brave.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny you were talking about how this whole thing is like central to the Joseph Smith story. So many of the interpersonal and political dynamics.
I seriously wonder how they would play with the how should I put it? With Paul and Peter's, like in other words, if the apostles' lives were as exposed, their sins were as laid bare, as our faults were laid bare, as Smith's was, if they would also hold their lives against them, even though they're martyrdom. I wonder how they would feel about Peter and Paul and all the 12. Considering, look at how they have faults. So, like, I don't know. I don't know if this is good criticism.
Dynamics that are playing out throughout the history of the church, all leading up to his death or martyrdom. And what's so interesting is that none of this gets any airtime in official church representations. If you watch the church's publication, Joseph Smith, Prophet of the Restoration, there's not a single reference to any of Joseph's other wives.
Which, like, again, if you've got nothing to hide and it really is all fine and sanctioned by God, why not tell people?
Yeah, why not? It's like, no, they were just lying about Joseph, and that's why he got killed. And it's also, on a slightly different note, the church claims that men and women are equal, and that women are just as important as men. They just have their place, separate but equal. And if that were the case, if women actually mattered, why wouldn't they get a mention? Did you ever hear the names of Joseph Smith's other wives growing up in the church?
And here's the thing that is like easy to forget when you're like just mired in the sexist thinking. Like for every like
Just
one of
mired
Joseph's
in the
polygamous
sexist
wives, like that's
thinking.
her only husband. This is her marriage. You know, it's being split 30 ways, or like maybe not even, you might not even get 30th of him, you know. But
It's interesting that for some he claims sexual exclusivity, like with 14-year-old Helen Mar Kimball, who thereafter wasn't allowed to even attend dances with youth her age. But then other women report that, in fact, one of Joseph Smith's wives remarked to one of Brigham Young's wives that how much she... how the most difficult trial of her life was having to be dishonest to her husband because she would receive Joseph Smith's affection whenever he felt like calling on her. So feeling like she had to be dishonest in behalf of Joseph Smith to her husband was such a huge trial.
Joseph wasn't like putting an end to these women's current marriages all the time.
Not all the time, no.
Which again just goes to show, you know, like how much it was a culture of secrecy, and you know, you can't have the men know because they're probably like leaders in the church or like involved in the church.
Except for some who get initiated into the practice.
Right.
Polygamy obviously doesn't go away with the death of Joseph Smith. It only becomes more open
Comes back
after...
harder, faster, stronger, younger.
Yeah. When Brigham Young leads the Saints to Utah, they begin openly practicing polygamy, which goes against, again, the laws of the United States.
No one else could have led the Saints to Utah.
No, nobody.
No one else could have come up with the grid system.
I don't have to go into all the history, but polygamy becomes the central issue in tensions between the blossoming state of Utah, formerly known as the Territory of Deseret, and the United States government. They pass a series of legislations, most notably the Edmunds-Tucker Act, which allows the federal government to seize all assets of the church. And many Mormon leaders, including the president of the church, go into hiding. And this is when lying for the Lord becomes like a very prominent principle in the church. And I want to be complex about this. You have this group of people who's trying to practice their religion, and they are doing the best that they can to prove in court that polygamy is central to their religion, so that they can say, you can't stop us from doing this because that's infringement of religion. Polygamy is a central doctrine. We need it. Without polygamy, Mormonism doesn't exist. And we have so many testaments of
Yeah, that's not where they stand now. That's interesting. That is very interesting.
various prophets and apostles attesting to such, again, in court.
Also tough because it's like the reasons the government didn't want them doing polygamy is not for the reasons they should actually care, you know, like women and children being coerced.
Right.
It's just like this, you know, the Christian idea of like one partner only.
And well, some of the they called polygamy one of the twin relics of barbarism, and people who came to Utah and reported on it definitely gave some insight into that thing. Salt Lake was seen as essentially a sex trafficking hub where men would go on missions and recruit these young, beautiful women under the pretense of being the one true religion. Meanwhile, they were just trying to recruit wives, and then they bring them back after having, you know.
Again, they're coloring this very much in one direction. So I would like to hear the counter arguments to this on this actual topic.
Given up all their money and possessions and their families and friends to hike across the United States. They arrive in Salt Lake only to find that they're being auctioned off to the person with the most keys who has first claim over these women.
Period cramps can happen at the worst time. But having control allows you to keep going.
And they don't have any money, they don't have any connections, they're not going to just like walk back alone across the United States, so they're kind of trapped in Utah in these patriarchal systems. And, you know, the people who in Washington were looking at this are like, yeah, this is bad, we need to clamp down on this.
And did the women who, you know, are coming in from England or whatever, did they even know that polygamy was happening?
For the most part, no. It was still, you know, milk before meat, or as I like to say, bait before switch.
It's like that's next level cult stuff, because back then, you know, you can't get a flight. It's like such a long journey, and you are literally stuck there.
Right.
In like the truest sense. Like you might as well be locked in like a Scientology room of torture.
Yeah,
it's the
absolutely.
Same level of access to escape.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to survive alone going across the plains.
No.
So you're just like in the middle of the desert.
And then you might be, just thinking about people like,
you can be certain that the church has fallen into apostasy because Mormonism equals polygamy. Now you have the church president saying, we don't do polygamy anymore. We need to keep our assets. And for a lot of people, that was just like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we don't practice polygamy anymore. And they kept performing polygamous marriages in the temple. This came to a head and became such a problem that in 1904, then President Joseph F. Smith issued a second manifesto wherein he officially ended the practice of polygamy.
That was the real one.
Again.
So that was like actually when it stopped.
Yeah. And even at the time, you still had apostles from the good old days who were like, no, the Lord said by his own voice that this would never change. So they kept doing it, and one of those apostles was Matthias Cowley, who was brought in before the Council of the 12.
I'll be interested when if there's anything in there in the actual Book of Mormon on this.
On charges of performing unauthorized marriages. He said, I am not dishonest and not a liar and have always been true to the work and to the brethren. We have always been taught that when the brethren were in a tight place, that it would not be amiss to lie to help them out.
We've always been taught, yeah.
He also testified that he heard a member of the first presidency say he would lie like hell to help the brethren. So he's like, hey man, I'm just doing what you told me to do. I didn't have time to go through the records, but this all becomes so much more convoluted during the Reed-Smoot hearings. We've done an article. Did we do a video? We did a video.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We'll link to the video of the Reed-Smoot hearings. I don't know how much we go specifically into the lies surrounding polygamy, but there is so much there. It's such a clusterfuck in the history of the Mormon Church where they're just like caught with their pants down in so many contradictions and errors. And you have the prophet saying like, well, I'm not really a prophet. They sustain me as such, but I haven't had any revelations and I don't claim any of that stuff. But some of that was lies surrounding the practice of polygamy. But again, this totally sets the tone for the next century about the church's relationship to truth. That it is okay to outright lie. It's okay to conceal information if you believe that it's in your best interest or the Lord's best interest or the church's best interest.
There's that same that exists in Islam as well, which has always bothered me.
And since then, we've had just countless examples of the church playing loosey-goosey with the truth. In fact, in regard to polygamy, we have people like Gordon B. Hinckley, who on air with was it Larry King or Mike Wallace, said we don't believe in polygamy. It's not doctrinal. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy because 150 years ago, your church was lobbying Congress to convince them that polygamy was central to the practice of the church.
And even in like private church settings, the leaders.
I'm kind of zoning out, guys. I think I'm only going to go maybe 10 more minutes or till we hit the hour 15 mark. If people come into the room and want to talk and chat, I'll stay on for longer. More to talk about Mormonism than to engage in these videos. Like I said, Zelph and the Self seems to be the most informative, but they're not fun. The Sick of Joseph seems to be completely nonsensical, but at least it's fun and I have something to say. So anyway, I'm going to keep going with this one, but I'm probably going to stop in a little bit less than 10 minutes unless I get some interaction in the chat. If you guys want to keep going, I'll keep going. But
So
I'm
saying,
not
like,
saying enough, in my opinion.
This will never go away, and if it does, the church is impossible.
Yes. And you have sitting members of the Council of the 12 Apostles who are sealed to more than one woman. Dallin H. Oaks, Russell M. Nelson, now president of the church, is sealed to 2 different women. So even if they don't practice polygamy in the sense of like being married to 2 women at the same time, they still believe that it is a principle that will carry out in heaven.
Because women whose husbands die aren't allowed to be sealed to multiple men.
No. And so, that's just an example of the way that...
I'm interested to see how the feminists who see anti-feminist and anti-women ideas in the Bible, how they view and interpret, how feminism views and interprets the Book of Mormon.
The church, if not outright lying, has no problem dancing around the truth in order to give a false impression to journalists. Another example of lying to journalists is Jeffrey R. Holland, who, when confronted by a BBC reporter who asked him about the temple penalties, he was like, this was around the time Mitt Romney was running for office, and he said, is it true that the temple has these gruesome penalties where you have promised to slit your throat or disembowel yourself or be disemboweled if you reveal the proceedings of the temple? And Jeffrey goes, that's not true. That's not true. We don't have temple penalties. And
But they still had them at that time.
And he's like, but you did. So Mitt Romney would have promised that his throat would be slit if he talked about the temple. And he goes, nope, that's not true. And it's like,
You'd expect him to have like a better lie locked and like some kind of better justification.
Well, you can see the way that like they're just not used to being called out. They're so.
Also, I need a new printer. So not only do I need to get away from Adobe because of their practices, but HP has finally hit me with that stupid subscription block, which is weird because I've never subscribed. I had a printer that I paid for completely, but it won't print now because I haven't renewed my subscription, but I never had a subscription. So yeah, I need an alternative to HP. So if anyone has any recommendations, let me know. I'm looking at Brother, and I'm looking at, there was another one. Was it Epson? Let me know something that doesn't have subscription service, something that doesn't block you out of using your own printer. Because I need to print things. I'm a writer. I need to print. There's stuff I have to print. And so, yeah.
Surrounded constantly by yes men who are just constantly buying into everything they can say. And when pressed by someone who has the facts, their just knee-jerk reaction is to be like, no, that's a lie. And then they see how they get painted into a corner.
Which is kind of a lot of, like, that is a very human thing for denial to be your first reaction.
A perfect example of this.
Is it the same guy? I think it's the same guy. So that's why I was saying, wow, what a change. But maybe they broke up, or maybe this is a new guy. Maybe she's dating a new ex-Mormon. I don't know.
This is in the 90s. Are y'all familiar with the September 6th? So in the 90s, the church excommunicated 6 high-profile intellectuals who were publishing opinions that the church didn't like.
It's funny that Dan doesn't get excommunicated. Wonder if he's been brought up in front of the council, or whatever they call it. That's interesting. I'm so interested in Dan's Mormonism, but not at all in Dan, like, individually. Like, I don't want to, like, have a conversation about his life. I just want to ask him a bunch of Mormon questions. I realize that's rude, but it's what I want to do.
Like, one of whom was historian D. Michael Quinn.
It seems like there's an intellectual dishonesty there. You know what I mean? I clearly, I don't believe that there is an intellectual dishonesty there because I'm Catholic, even though I know all the stuff that I know. So I don't think there's an intellectual dishonesty there, but it feels like there is. And I just want to press it and poke and see exactly where he falls on these things.
Been a professor at BYU and was a very respected, notable historian who found a bunch of documents and published them. And the church was like, nah, you're not supposed to do that. Like, this goes against our...
Just the Book of Mormon seems completely unreliable. So I don't get it. I don't get it.
Whitewash, sanitized history, and they had a big problem. So he ended up getting excommunicated. Boyd K. Packer told him in a meeting that his problem with historians was that they idolized the truth. So anyway, Boyd K. Packer, the villain of this era, went against church.
Whether unreliable doesn't mean fun or bad or evil, okay? It just means unreliable, historically.
Church protocol, and met with the stake president of Paul Toscano, who we've met, and...
Wow, I just built the most amazing...
Oh my gosh. I'm so tired of commercials. Okay.
That he needed to excommunicate Paul Toscano. And again, this goes against church protocol. Then Steve Benson, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning editorial cartoonist, went and met with Elder Oaks, or talked to him on the phone and recorded the conversation. And Oaks covered for Packer, saying like, actually, he said that, yeah, Packer did that. It's against church protocol. I'm worried that the church is going to get sued over this because this isn't how things are supposed to happen. And then later, in an interview with the press, Elder Oaks said, I have no awareness of this happening. If this happened, it's probably just miscommunication. Utah, and knows what...
The loudest is like the thing you're guilty of.
I'm sorry, guys. They're boring me to death.
Church when I was 16 and living in England. I had a friend who was Mormon and his family was really, really great. So when they invited me over to their house for dinner and said the missionaries would be there, I was down. I was agnostic at the time, having grown up in a non-religious family like most people in England. And so I listened to their little missionary lesson and then just kind of forgot about it.
Let's go back to this one. No, stop skipping. Stop. Let's try this again. Here we go.
To Dave and Bethany's reaction to the Paul and Morgan 20. I'm just kidding. We're telling our Mormon deconstruction story.
We've reacted. We didn't like our reaction. We're shutting it down. We're just doing straightforward content now.
We are now antagonistic towards all reactions from this point onward.
We refuse to react. We're only spontaneous initial moves. Gods of our own sphere.
Stunning. How are you doing?
Doing great. Now that it took us forever to set this up, but I think we did. I think we got the shot.
Life in HD is not as easy and effortless and gorgeous and stunning as it looks. You guys probably just get here and think like, wow, they look incredible, just presumably with no effort.
No, it's us fumbling around in 480p for most of it.
Yeah, and just sort of kind of like writhing through the maze of wires around my kitchen. Just getting some water.
Through the labyrinth of booby traps.
Because we don't have any of like the plug organized. It's just, there's a lot going on here.
These girl bosses are still learning to go pro, and they'll make pros out of us someday.
Forced into HD, my story. It's not a sensitive joke. It's like, I can't tell. We have a lot of new subscribers around here. Hello, welcome. We're glad to have you. And also, I'm terrified at all the new eyeballs, but please, Whisper in HD. But that wasn't us. So
I might continue this video tomorrow just because their deconstruction from it might be an interesting story. But if it gets boring, I'm going to skip to the next Mormon stuff after that.
you can't cancel us for anything we said pre-HD era.
That was all prologue.
Okay. That's it. We're done. Questions for the audience. What printer should I get? Yeah, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get away from the HP system. So what printer do you recommend? I need something by the end of the week for many, many important reasons. And some personal, not as important reasons. Let's see. Things are good. I need a solution to the AdSense problem. Google Pay doesn't exist anymore. I just got eligible. I did my application, but there's no such thing as Google Pay in the United States. So I can't go forward with my application for monetization. So I need a solution. If anyone knows of a workaround or knows what to do or knows what's coming, please let me know. If someone even has a video on it, link it to me. You have to send it to me in a message. I am going to get a business email soon, so that way you guys can get to me through there. Let's see. What else? I am reading the Book of Mormon. I am reading Dan Barden's commentary or I don't know, history of the Bible book. I am reading Tertullian against Marcion. I'm reading it very slow, not because I want to and not because it's a hard read. It's just I'm really busy currently with a lot of non-religious stuff. So I'm having a hard time finding time to read. Which is kind of disappointing. And I think that's it on my end. Yeah. Oh, that's Sketch Kid. Not Stitch, but the other one. Although, Stitch. No. Not Adam and Stitch. Yeah, that's a bummer, man, that people tried to expose him and who knows what else. Like I said, everyone, God loves you, God forgives you. Change your ways, follow Him. Follow me, follow my example. I'm a redeemed person, man. I'm a sinner. I'm a sinner like everybody else. I sin. I make mistakes all the time, and I feel really bad what happened to that kid. And I say kid, the adult who's on ESPN and much more successful than I will ever be. But I feel bad for what happened to that guy. He should not have been exposed like that. He should not, whatever that person was trying to do by ruining his life, that guy's an evil son of a bitch and shouldn't have done that to that dude. That's a grown man who was having sex with someone consensually. So yeah, he did porn. So what? Our job is to forgive and to share the message of forgiveness. So it's a bummer that someone tried to expose him. I'm really glad that things are going well for him. I'm sorry that he had any self-deleting thoughts. And if he was a much smaller channel, I would tell him to come here and talk to me. I've dealt with all that kind of stuff, and I'd gladly have a conversation with him. Don't hate anyone. It's not your job. It's not what you're here to do. Don't judge, don't hate, just love. It doesn't mean accept. I don't give a shit about acceptance or tolerance or any of those kind of buzzwords. Just love the other person and care for them like you would care for yourself, and care for them like you would your son or your daughter or your best friend, and let them make the mistakes they're going to make. Let them enjoy their free will, just like you enjoy yours. And, you know, when they fall, help them get back up. If they make a mistake, give them good advice and tell them the right thing to do, but don't force them to. And realize that you could be wrong about your opinion. So listen to their opinion and don't over criticize. So yeah, forgive everyone for everything. Love everyone. Love yourself. Love your neighbor. Love your enemy. And love God above all. Peace, like, and subscribe. Talk to you all later. I do need to start doing stuff with the Patreon. I do need money coming in. There's really big reasons why I need that. I might or might not share some of those reasons on one of these streams. Like I said, no weekend video. Tomorrow will be the last Mormon video for this run. Next week we do Christianity again, and then the week after that we are doing Judaism. All right. Talk to you all later. Have a good night. Peace. Let's do the music.
And do my thing, I don't look the other way, I stare that motherfucker straight. Don't care what they say, nah, everyone's the same. Don't get caught up in their games, just pick a lane and do your thing. I don't just wanna be great, I'll be the best. Make everybody forget all the rest. Man, I feel blessed, bulletproof vest. Over my chest for that haters request. I'll be okay, I pick my lane. I'ma stick to it like horse of the fame. This is the game that we all play, and I'm gonna win it the fuck out my way. Never changed myself, I've always stayed the same. No